Okay, so this video is gonna be dive into the more philosophical aspects of what consciousness is, and also what relating it to evolution, and sort of seeing some of the paradoxes and the issues that arise with understanding why we exist and why we have the experience of being conscious. Okay, so let me talk about some of the people on either side. There's people like Daniel Dennett and a lot of major scientists, they're called reductionists, but all they're really saying is consciousness is the brain. Consciousness is our gray matter, and it creates the simulation or experience of being conscious, being a being, of being, of sensory perception, and also some kind of conscious entity. This is created by the brain. There's nothing more to say about that. We just haven't worked out the details. Now, the I guess you could say the opposing school or theory says, well, that's all well and good. Like obviously we need the brain to allow consciousness, but maybe consciousness is more. Why? Because if you look into the brain, there's nothing conscious there. If you look at the individual cells, they're not conscious. I mean, where is consciousness generated? Um, and and this they're called, negatively speaking, the opposing side is called reductionists. These guys are called mysteriums, who basically, by their opposing school, the reductionists call these guys the mysteriums. The mysteriums call these guys the reductionists. So the mysteriums are called the mysteriums because they think consciousness is mysterious. It's a strange thing, and it's not epiphenomenal, meaning it's not just a byproduct of evolution and of neurons. So, and they go back and forth, and I think they both have a good point, and I think it's a little too early for the reductionists to say, it's this, and it's a little, again, it's too early for the mysteriums to say the opposing side, because there's just not enough data yet. We just don't understand enough about consciousness in the brain yet. Um, but nevertheless, it's interesting to talk about this, because any kind of discussion helps, understand it, and perhaps raises new ideas about getting what it is. And I like to take the middle view, because I don't like to go on either side and say it's all this or it's all that. I think the reductionists have a very strong argument. It's based on empirical observations, but the downside is what the mysteriums say is, look, you can go into the brain and you don't see anything that's conscious. We've explored every facet of the human being, and there's no single point that's conscious, and there's no lump of points that's conscious. Somehow it's generated from all of these things, but we don't know how. And it's very strange, because the universe seems to be made out of dead matter. Not dead, but inanimate matter. If you go down deep enough, it's just particles, it's just atoms, it's just chemistry, it's just physics. How does consciousness arise out of unconscious things? That's the big dilemma. Now, and that's the main argument for mysteriums. They're saying, look, these things are unconscious. There's something more, and it's interesting, because here's the argument that mysteriums can take against the reductionists. They say, like I was just saying, you go in, you don't find anything conscious. And even more so, they're saying the reductionists are arguing that you don't even need a explanation of consciousness. You're reducing it all to unconscious things. Everything can be explained empirically, observably, without any kind of inner dimension. And because of that, argue the mysteriums, consciousness might as well not exist, because it's almost like saying the universe is governed by laws, physical laws, and because of that, consciousness is explained physically. But if that's true, then we're thinking, acting, feeling like conscious entities, but we're really not. There's no reason why there should be consciousness, because everything is physically explainable. Everything, we might as well just be automatons, basically, we're saying. There's devoid of any kind of inner explanation as to why consciousness arises. Reductionists can answer that. Their evidence is saying we don't have enough data yet to tell you exactly why it's generated, but it's definitely generated. And then the mysteriums say, well, you don't have the data because you're reducing everything to physical matter, and problems arise because if you don't have, how is living things created out of dead things? How is consciousness created out of an unconscious universe without there being some kind of greater meaning? Maybe consciousness as part of a universe, some kind of higher realm, some kind of greater science will understand that. And the mysteriums, I guess you could say, might be speculating far ahead. Perhaps there is something like that, but it's too early to say for sure either way. But I think they have a good argument because I think they both have a good argument, but I feel like the reductionists are taking the path that scientists always need to take. But I think there should be more openness to embrace the mysteriums because they're kind of criticized as being unscientific and speculative. But really, it's the speculative that often is able to kind of take science to the next level. The contraries, those who are against the main paradigm. The main paradigm today in science tends to be a very reductionist one that, and understandably so, because the path of science needs to be incremental. It needs to judge and understand things very thoroughly and empirically. The blindingly obvious it needs to be in order for it to be called scientifically sound. And perhaps we need more speculativeness. Perhaps we need more interdimension of science, like psychology is one. But even psychology is kind of being reduced down to evolutionary psychology, which says, like, oh, the reason why we act like this is because our ancestors did this. And that is partially true. But there are problems. And one example in modern science, in evolutionary psychology, this is the Psychology Today article a year, a half or two ago. They said the purpose of dreaming is a survival instinct. It puts you through nightmare scenarios that you have to survive. And maybe technical things like, oh no, you're late for work and you have a dream about that, or you have a dream about trying to get somewhere. It's almost like a training ground for the mind to go through events that may happen to help it survive. Now, it's true. It's not that evolutionary psychology isn't true, and these reductionist attempts are not true to some degree, but there are other higher levels of meaning in dreams. Obviously, there are emotional dreams. If you look at Carl Jung, you can't reduce a lot of what he's saying to just instinct and survival. There's higher consciousness things that have emerged. Not that they're not relatable to physical, empirical, neurological, matter, but their meaning is more abstract. It has to be seen through another explanation than just instinct down here. So, like, we can't, even though everything is explainable at a very basic empirical level, it doesn't mean it's reducible in the sense that you can talk about everything from, if they had their way, physicalists, they say everything's reducible to physics, but you can't talk about biology through physics. You need the higher order biology of science to explain, the higher order of biology to explain, how organisms evolve. So we sort of need these higher order explanations to talk about this stuff, and it's very complex. So, in the same way, we may find we need to explain things in a higher order way with consciousness. Because if physicalists had their way, and I find physicalism to be very hard to agree with, if they had their way, and the implication of physicalism is that there is no need for anything greater. There's just a physical universe, and it's physically described by physical laws. And if this is so, then consciousness is unexplained. Consciousness is a byproduct, but it doesn't appear to be. That means the whole universe is explainable through completely reductionist means, including love and relationships and experience and emotion. And yes, there are biological explanations for these, but they seem to be devoid of any inner meaning. But our entire experience, our being, is an inner meaning. It is a beingness somehow out of this inorganic matter. That's the ultimate mystery. And both sides are trying to reduce it to all inner meaning or all outer meaning. The problem with science, it's exploring the outer forms. Modern science, at least, empirical reductionist science, explores all the outsides of things, but it can't get inside. And I think we need to have more of an inner science as well to balance out the necessary outer side of science, because it can explain things. Because according to the outer side, there should be no consciousness. Everything should be explained through the outer forms, and I'll continue this in part two.